The United States government is paying $77,692 for a mail truck that a person inside its own production facility said, "We don't know how to make a damn truck." The gas version of that same truck costs $54,584. Congress made up the difference with $3 billion of your money. By November 2024, the Postal Service expected 3,000 of these trucks on the road. They received 93. This is not a supply chain problem. This is not a parts shortage. This is a documented procurement failure involving a defense contractor that had never built a delivery vehicle, a regulatory override that forced the more expensive version of a truck that was not being built, and a production collapse the agency saw coming a year before the trucks failed to arrive. In this investigation, we're going to trace who picked the contractor, who mandated the expensive version, and why the trucks still aren't there. The first villain on our list is the contract itself. The United States Postal Service has been running on the same trucks since 1987, an aging fleet. The Grumman Long Life vehicle was designed for a 24-year lifespan. By 2024, most of them were 30 to 37 years old. They have no airbags, no air conditioning, and a 3-speed transmission from an era when the Iron Duke 4-cylinder engine was considered acceptable engineering. The people delivering your mail have been waiting for a replacement for a decade. When USPS finally moved to replace the fleet, it ran a competition that started in 2015 and ended with 3 finalists. One of them was Workhorse Group, an American electric vehicle company that spent 6 years and over $6 million on its bid. Workhorse built 6 real prototypes in 18 weeks. It was the only finalist proposing an all-electric fleet. The other finalist was Oshkosh Defense, a Wisconsin company that manufactures military vehicles, fire trucks, and heavy construction equipment. Oshkosh had never previously produced a last-mile delivery vehicle, much less an electric one. That detail comes not from a critic of the contract, but from Workhorse's own bid protest filed in the U.S. Court of Federal Claims in June 2021. In February 2021, USPS awarded Oshkosh the contract. A defense contractor, no delivery vehicles, $6 billion. Workhorse sued, alleging USPS had put its thumb on the scale against its bid. The complaint described the winning Oshkosh design as having skipped the prototype phase altogether for the electric version. USPS disqualified Workhorse, citing a safety incident during testing. Workhorse argued the incident was driver error, not a vehicle failure. The case was withdrawn one day before oral arguments were scheduled. The contractor that won was a defense company with no delivery vehicle experience building an electric truck it had not fully prototyped. That is the foundation the next $10 billion was built on. But the contract was only the beginning of the problem, because even before Oshkosh had to prove it could build the truck, another institution had already decided it knew better than the people who actually run the routes which version of that truck you should be paying for. The United States Postal Service delivers to 161 million addresses across every climate and terrain configuration in America, rural routes in Montana, urban density in Manhattan, desert heat in Phoenix. The Postal Service knows its roots, and when Postmaster General Louis DeJoy announced the Oshkosh contract, his office was clear. 10% of the new vehicles would be electric, 90% would be gas-powered. Many postal routes are too long, too remote, or too infrastructure poor for battery-dependent vehicles. The Biden administration rejected that math. EPA Associate Administrator Vicky Arroyo publicly declared the Postal Service's environmental analysis fundamentally flawed and accused USPS of violating the National Environmental Policy Act. The Council on Environmental Quality filed similar accusations. Environmental groups and a multi-state coalition, led by California's Attorney General, filed lawsuits against USPS to block the gas-heavy procurement. DeJoy did not back down quietly. His exact words to the House Oversight Committee were, "I had not agreed to put electric vehicles into the fleet until there were appropriate cost benefits to the organization. Under sustained legal and political pressure, USPS changed course. 75% of the 60,000 planned vehicles would now be electric. Congress provided $3 billion from the Inflation Reduction Act specifically to cover the price difference. That price difference is not abstract. The gas NGDV costs $54,584 per unit. The electric NGDV costs $77,692 per unit, a $23,000 premium per vehicle. Across 45,000 electric units, the cost difference exceeds $1 billion. DeJoy stated plainly that he would not have invested in electric vehicles as aggressively without that congressional funding. The agency that operates the fleet said the all-electric version was not operationally justified. The agencies that regulate the fleet said it was mandatory anyway. The difference came out of the federal budget. And then the trucks didn't arrive. The Oshkosh contract called for the first NGDV vehicles to begin service in October 2023. That deadline moved to June 2024. By August 2023, Oshkosh had already prepared an internal presentation projecting only 150 vehicles delivered for all of 2024. Their own document described this as approximately 2,100 less than planned. The Washington Post obtained that presentation as part of a review of more than 20,000 internal government and company records. The problems were specific. Airbag calibration systems could not be certified. Water was leaking into the cabin. A primary body supplier called Challenge informed Oshkosh leaders in late 2022 that it did not expect to complete its first NGDV body until May 2024, months after the trucks were already supposed to be on delivery routes. An interim supplier was brought in, but it could only produce 5 truck bodies per week. Oshkosh was building 1 truck per day at a point where its own targets required 80 per day. The person inside the production operation who spoke to the Washington Post did not offer excuses. The person said, "We don't know how to make a damn truck." The person overseeing quality control resigned in November 2023. By November 2024, USPS had received 93 trucks, not 3,000. 93. Oshkosh's chief executive told investors on October 30th of that year that he was really happy with where they were. The company's public statement called the NGDV a revolutionary vehicle. Meanwhile, letter carriers were still reporting for work in the Grumman LLVS, no airbags, no air conditioning. Since 2014, at least 407 of those trucks have caught fire, approximately 1 every 5 days, according to 3,954 pages of FOIA documents obtained by Vice and Motherboard. A truck designed for a 24-year lifespan is now 37 years old and still on the road, because the system that was supposed to replace it chose the wrong contractor, mandated the more expensive version, and then produced 93 trucks in place of 3,000. Here is what the smart money is watching right now. President Trump signed Executive Order 14154 in January 2025, directing federal fleet procurement to prioritize cost and practicality over environmental mandates. The Oshkosh contract has not been formally canceled. However, congressional Republicans have introduced legislation to strip USPS remaining Inflation Reduction Act electric vehicle funding. A competing contractor called Morgan Olson has already delivered 5 field test units of its Kestrel delivery vehicle, developed without any federal subsidies, with a proposal to build 100,000 vehicles by 2029 at $5.5 billion. That is roughly $4.5 billion fewer dollars than the current program, for more trucks, on a faster timeline. You now know what the postal workers know, what the congressional investigators know, and what the production insiders were saying a year before the delivery numbers collapsed. The pattern here is not unique to this contract. A regulatory body overrides an operator. A contractor is selected on terms that have nothing to do with ability to perform. The bills get paid by people who will never see the boardrooms where these decisions were made. Subscribe if you want to know what happens next, because this story is not over.